There's no reason to think that Mozart couldn't have written this piece in a single day. It might just be the date of the manuscript, but he may well have just written it in the day because it's very improvisatory in its form. And we get this rondo melody, which is played at the beginning, and of course it's a rondo. It keeps coming back around. So here's the theme. Slightly. So the second phrase, which is of course just mostly a repetition of the first, is just very slightly varied, and that turns into and so on. So he's improvising already. Top of the next page, the theme comes back, and he starts with that varied version. So this is the first phrase. And then, just slightly behind the beat. That's that. And then we get another little section, and then over a couple of pages, here we get this execution of what is so often talked about as being tempo rubato of the period. And so many writers, C.P. Bach writes this in his book about how to play the keyboard. Daniel Gottlob Türk in 1789 writes this book in how to play the keyboard. Many others writing about vocal styles. Leopold Mozart writes it about violin style, that you take the melody and shift the melody slightly one side of the beat. And if you listen to Beethoven's violin concerto, you'll know that there's places actually in the violin concerto he writes that, he almost takes a theme and then syncopates it against the beat. So this is the next guise of the theme, and this is the form of tempo rubato that we know Mozart played all the time in his performance. We start with a very simple execution of the theme. So that's the first phrase, largely untouched from before, and then Mozart wrote this wonderful letter to his father, and he says about how he's off away on a tour playing, and many people are remarking on his performance, and in particular he says, there are so many people that can't believe my tempo rubato. I play this tempo rubato where they think, these silly people think that in order to play tempo rubato, you have to change the tempo and you have to lag behind and you have to push forward. They simply can't believe, he says, that it's possible to play a tempo rubato where the right hand plays the tempo rubato and the left hand playing the accompaniment knows nothing about it. But this, for Mozart, is a really true form of that tempo rubato, keeping to that nice tempo. So we can see so much in Mozart's music that actually we don't need to actually, add the rubato itself if we really take account of the score and take account of that detail and see how much either he's doing it in that A minor sonata or this rondo in A minor of just writing a slightly different form of rubato in, and we recognise just how expressive that is as you wait. It seems to be, quite a precise way of doing the rubato. And of course, the idea of tempo rubato is that you steal time. This is, of course, what the word means. You're stealing time. I mentioned Daniel Gottlob Türk before. Türk in his Klavierschule, he actually gives it two forms. He talks about tempo rubato with a U, R-U, rubato. And also sometimes called, he says, tempo rubato, R-O. And this, I think, emphasises for us English speakers in particular that the word rubato, it comes from the same root as our English word to rob. It's to steal, and you are robbing the time. In this type of tempo rubato that we have in the classical period in Mozart, you rob the time, but also, of course, you have to give it back. Because the accompaniment, as Mozart says, doesn't know anything about the tempo rubato, and if you steal time in the right hand, then you have to somehow progress forward, and you might end up with a flourish before you get back in time. And that's something which is actually, as I say, is remarked on and is written into many scores in Mozart's time. But it's quite interesting when you compare that with what Tossi was talking about in the Baroque period of just taking individual notes or just small parts of phrases and just shifting them. Here Mozart does it by precisely a semiquaver. And yet that can't be the case, because we know that, notation always is this kind of an approximation of what composers intended. And if we are to dance as if we are counting the steps all the time, then yes, we will play exactly a semiquaver behind. But actually, if we recognize that the notation is actually an approximation of something which is intended to sound so much more spontaneous, we start to recognize how that rubato is really written in.